That's me again. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to introduce our speaker today, who is Derby Rotten Scoundrels member Lynn Slaughter. Lynn is the author of several novels, and she's going to talk to us today about adding romance to your mystery. Lynn?
Okay, thank you so much, Mickey. Well, I'm really glad to be doing this because, as you know, I love Derby Rotten Scoundrels, and this chapter has been a big part of my author's journey. I thought I would, let me see if I can share my screen here. Let's see. I don't know. Oh, there it is. Okay, there it is. All right, that's what I'd like to share if I can bring it. I don't know. Is there a way to bring that up, Susan? Oh, share. I guess I push share. Okay. Okay. So I wanted to just, for some of you, most of you know my story, but a few of you probably don't. So I just wanted to start out by saying that I am a very late in life fiction writer. I published my first novel when I was 65. So I have the feeling that it's never too late. And I spent most of my career as a professional dancer and dance educator. And after I stopped dancing, I was kind of sad. And I got this idea for a novel about a young dancer, probably to stay close to my longtime identity as a dancer, I guess. But anyway, this young dancer has issues. Her father and her friends are keeping some pretty major secrets from her, and she's trying to unravel them. And that that particular, let me see how I move this down here. Oh, there it is. That particular project became my first novel while I danced. And after that, I really got hooked on writing fiction. I did not think I had the fiction gene at all. I had written a ton of magazine articles and one nonfiction book, but I didn't think I had whatever it takes to write fiction. But I got hooked anyway, and I went back to school, earned my MFA from Seton Hill University, and after that, I just kept going. So I want to start out by doing some talking at you, I guess, about romantic mysteries. And I want to apologize in advance for spending a fair amount of time just talking about my own work, because I'm giving lots of examples of what I'm talking about. Obviously, I'm very familiar with the stuff that I've written, but there'll be lots of other authors I'll talk about as well. After doing some talking, I want to open this up to questions and comments, and then, time permitting, I'd love to do kind of a brainstorming activity with you about getting ideas for a romantic mystery. So I want to start out with a very basic question. What the heck is it? What's a romantic mystery? Well, according to author Maggie Toussaint, the driving force in a romantic mystery is the mystery, with the romance playing a secondary role. With a romantic mystery, the protagonist is above all trying to seek an answer to a crime or puzzle. In classic whodunits, the red herrings misdirect the protagonist and the reader and heighten the story's tension. Okay, so why should we inject romance into a mystery? Okay, I put this in because this is a very hot couple. I think they're very cute. Okay, moving on. There are lots of reasons to inject romance into your mystery. Okay, one is obviously it's an opportunity to expand your readership. I, like many people, love romance and I love mysteries, and you're going to have a chance of building your readership even more by injecting romance. More to the point, though, by adding a romantic relationship to a mystery, you really add emotional depth to your characters and your story. You humanize your protagonists, and I believe you help readers really identify with them. Also, romantic subplots offer the opportunity to show character change, the transformation that takes place inside the protagonist. So in my latest novel, Miss Q, the romantic subplot really explores the growth and change of the homicide detective in her personal life. So I'm going to keep going here. Also, putting romance into your mysteries really can up the emotional stakes, the suspense, and the tension. So this, for example, this A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Mayhem. I love that title. That's by Amanda Collins. The anxiety the Scotland Yard inspector feels about the safety of his romantic interest, Lady Catherine, who insists on investigating a murder case right alongside him, really ups the tension and keeps us turning the pages as readers. We're as worried about her as he is. All right, so another thing to know is that stakes can involve the whole question of whether the romantic interest is trustworthy or not. So in my romantic YA mystery, It Should Have Been You, the protagonist discovers that her new boyfriend failed to mention that the uncle he's moved in with happens to be the homicide detective who's been dogging her for months as his favorite suspect in her twins' murder. So all of a sudden she wonders, my gosh, maybe he didn't care about me at all. Maybe he was just trying to get close to me to see what kind of information he could get about me. So she feels very betrayed. And she thinks, well, maybe he wasn't really interested in me at all. In some romantic mysteries, there's the chance that the heroine is falling for someone who will turn out to be the murderer or involved in the central crime in some other way, maybe even really using her or betraying her. And that is the case in Erica Miner's Aria for Murder. It's a wonderful opera mystery. This is written by a woman who was played in the pit at the Met for many years as a violinist. So her protagonist is a violinist, and she's trying to figure out who killed her beloved mentor, the orchestra conductor. She falls for one of the Met opera singers, only to discover, spoiler alert, that he's actually the murderer. Fortunately, there is an opera-loving detective who ends up being a more promising candidate as a romantic interest for her. Okay, moving on. Okay, I just put in here because he's hot. All right, now moving on. Also, a romantic subplot can offer some diversion. Switching gears can give you a reprieve when the main plot is simmering and provide a whole other storyline readers will grab onto. For example, in Ellen Meister's Love Sold Separately, the ups and downs of the relationship of the protagonist and the detective in charge of the case adds a lot of interest in the story and definitely kept me turning the pages. Okay, a couple of other things to keep in mind. Okay, happily ever after or happily for now may occur in a romantic mystery, but it's not necessary. So that's an important thing to know. I usually like to have an HEA or an HFN, but you don't have to in a romantic mystery.
But
Also,
just to stop you for a second, would that in fact be a requirement in a romance?
yes, and talk about in a minute. I'm
Question.
going to. That's a great question, Susan. And in a minute, I'll talk about what is the difference between romantic suspense and a romantic mystery. Okay, great question. All right, in a mystery series, the romance may have a very slow burn over many books. So Lori Robbins has done this series. It's won all kinds of awards. It's the On Point Mystery Series. And the attraction between the amateur sleuth, who's actually a ballerina, and the homicide detective investigating the murders at her ballet company is very clear. You see, they really are attracted to one another, and their relationship grows over each book, but they never actually achieve a clear happily ever after in their relationship. So it's kind of interesting. So what Susan was saying is such a great question. Is a romantic mystery the same as romantic suspense? No, not exactly. In a romantic suspense, the driving force is the romance, the love story between two individuals. The suspense subplot adds to the conflict and tension of the story by forcing the characters to make changes under pressure. Life and death can be on the line. So according to Roxanne St. Clair, in a good romantic suspense, at least one of the protagonists is in danger, or someone she or he loves, like a sibling or a child, is in danger. And the love story is building at the same time that the hero and the heroines are confronting this escalating jeopardy until both, I love this, the suspense and the romance reach a crescendo that leaves the mystery solved, the villain defeated, and the main characters ending happily ever after. So again, in romantic suspense, the happily ever after is a requirement. And that would not be true for a romantic mystery. Now, another interesting thing about romantic suspense, there I go. The identity of the perpetrator may be known at the beginning, and then the suspense lies in can he or she be stopped in time. So Nora Roberts' Shelter in Place, that's a great example of romantic suspense. The police detective in it figures out early on the identity of a serial killer. The killer is systematically offing survivors of a mass shooting in a shopping mall. The detective knows from the get-go, he's on the list of future victims. He was shot, nearly killed by the culprit. But meantime, he's fallen in love with another potential victim, an artist who is also at the mall. So the final showdown of the detective with the killer is especially satisfying because we know that he not only saved his own life, but that of the woman he loves, and made it possible to reach the happily ever after conclusion of their romance. That's a very good book. I like Nora Roberts. I know not everyone likes her, but I do. Okay. All right. In reality, there's lots of crossover. Going by Roxanne St. Clair's definition of a romantic suspense being a novel where at least one of the protagonists is in danger and the love story is building at the same time, I could make the argument that some of my novels are close to being romantic suspense, even though I think of them as romantic mysteries. So in It Should Have Been You, which I mentioned earlier, this young girl started receiving these threatening texts sent to her email, threats to her life. So she thinks this online stalker believes that she murdered her twins. So she's going to have to figure out who actually did it to get him off her case. At the same time, she's engaged in this new romance. It's very hot with a young man who is keeping secrets from her. She nearly loses her life in the course of uncovering the identity of her twin's murderer. So, is it romantic mystery or romantic suspense? I think it has elements of both. In practice, though, I think the distinction doesn't matter that much to us as readers. I love reading romantic suspense and romantic mysteries. I don't particularly care how they're categorized, but as writers, we absolutely have to know what we're writing. If we self-publish, we want to know what readership we're targeting, or if we're seeking traditional publication, we need to know what particular publishers to shoot for. And furthermore, publishers want to know how to market our books and what genre they fit into, and bookstores want to know where in the world to place us. So we kind of have to know what we're doing. So supposing we decide, okay, I want to inject some romance into my mystery and raise the emotional stakes. What are some considerations? Okay, first of all, there has to be a good reason for your protagonist to end up sharing time and space with your romantic interest. You can't just stick any old romance in there. And I actually think that it's a good idea to do a GMC analysis for both your mystery and your romance. So most of you are probably familiar with what that is, but Deborah Dixon, romance writer, came up with the idea of, you have to know what these people want, you have to know what motivates them, and you have to understand their internal and external conflicts in reaching their goals. And that is very helpful, both in thinking about a romantic relationship as well as thinking about a mystery. All right, what are some possible premises? Okay, one is the protagonist wants to investigate a crime because someone they care about is a suspect or is missing. And of course, you have the possible tension and attraction with the investigator. So this book I mentioned earlier, Love Sold Separately, the star host of a shopping channel is found shot to death in her office. The newest employee, she's the protagonist, knows the chief suspect couldn't have killed the star because he was up on the roof with her smoking a joint and doing some celebratory kissing because she just got a job at this shopping channel. She's very worried, though, that he is the chief suspect because the guy's an ex-con on parole with a small child he's devoted to. She cares about him. She wants to protect him, even though their romance ends up going nowhere. And the one she really has eyes for is the detective in charge of the case. So it's moving on. That's one type of premise. Here's another. The enemies to lovers trope. Okay, here's this wonderful mystery again I mentioned earlier. So this is set in 1865 England, and the newspaper columnist, Lady Catherine Bascom, entangles herself in the cases of Scotland Yard's Detective Inspector Andrew Eversham, not once but twice. They start out, he can't stand her. She's a meddler and blah, blah, blah. But of course, then he falls for her. She falls for him. Sometimes it's a situation of amateur sleuths getting together to investigate, and they become romantically involved, either because one wants to get close to the other, aha, I see my chance here, or to keep that person safe. So an example of that would be my novel, Alicia's Song. The protagonist is a young woman of color on scholarship at a prestigious New England boarding school. And when her beloved vocal teacher and mentor disappears, she's sure that something terrible has happened. She's got to investigate, make sure her mentor is okay. Well, meantime, this sensitive cellist named Cody is really crushing on her. He wants to get close to her, and he sees his chance. He appoints himself her official sidekick. And never mind that both of their families very strongly disapprove of their relationship. Cody sees his chance. He will break her resistance to dating him down. And obviously I have a whole Romeo-Juliet trope going here, which I think does add to the tension and conflict in the novel. Okay. Sometimes romance blossoms between two people who have compelling, though different, reasons for wanting to investigate a crime. So this fatal finale, this is the first in a series by Kathleen Marple-Cow. And it features this opera singer at the turn of the century, Ella Shane. She has this very successful opera company. She's single-mindedly devoted to her art. She's no interest in getting married or having a relationship. This is her life, is this opera company. However, when an overacting young Juliet takes real poison during the final act of an opera, she's understandably upset and distracted. The authorities rule the death as a tragic accident, but she's not so sure. And she says, oh my gosh, what if I have a murderer right in my company lurking about? I've got to figure this out. And then this charming English Duke arrives on her Greenwich Village doorstep to find out what happened to his late poisoned niece. So they both really, really want to solve this mystery for different reasons. But of course, they get very attracted to one another. And Ella gets very confused. I don't want to be attracted. I don't want to be somebody's wife, but he seems really enlightened and doesn't seem to care about their class differences or the prospect of having a working wife. So, you know, some of her resistance to a relationship is starting to break down. By the end of the first book, it's clear that the romance between the Duke and Ella is going to continue to develop, but we don't know how or whether they will ever reach a happily ever after. So that's another type of premise. This is another. The hero or heroine is the chief suspect and needs to prove their innocence and recruits help from a professional. So that's the case in Jennifer J. Chow's book, Mimi Lee Gets a Clue. Pet lover is Mimi, who, by the way, has a talking sidekick named Marshmallow, and she wants to expose the local breeder, Russ Nolan, who has been treating Chihuahuas very badly. But when he's found dead, she becomes the main suspect. The one attorney she knows is a new guy in her apartment building, who of course is swoon-worthy. So she contacts him for help and romance ensues. As is typical of many mystery series, by the end of the book, it's clear romance is blooming, but we don't know what the future will hold for this couple. Okay. It's also possible that the hero or heroine is being blackmailed or threatened in some way, and the romantic interest is involved in a way that may not even be immediately apparent. So that's kind of the premise of It Should Have Been You that I talked about earlier. In Deadly Setup, the problem is that the threat really is that this poor young woman may lose her freedom and get convicted of a murder that she did not commit. So she's determined to prove her innocence, and the romantic interest is someone she has entered a relationship with. He gets involved in trying to help her, and of course he also happens very conveniently to have a dad who's an ex-homicide cop who offers his help. And often you'll see this in mysteries with amateur sleuths. Well, they're sticking somebody who has some expertise or ways of getting information, who's more of an official person. Okay, a popular trope is also, a popular trope is also a private eye who takes on a case and becomes romantically interested in a client who may or may not be totally reliable or on the level. So obviously, think Sam Spade and the elusive Miss Wonderly in The Maltese Falcon. Okay. So much less common is to have the romantic subplot not be directly connected to the mystery, but threaded through the novel and be a vehicle for growth and change of the protagonist. So in Miss Q, this homicide detective has a very messed up personal life. She's keeps getting involved with married men, like the medical examiner on the case. Her friend is worried about her. She's going into therapy to figure out why she keeps doing this to herself. And her friend fixes her up with someone, and she's very confused because she's actually attracted to someone who's available. Okay. But so just to quickly sum up here, review, lots of crossover, but writing a romantic mystery is different from writing romantic suspense. The mystery is the driving force and the romance is the subplot. It offers an opportunity to add depth to your characters, to watch them grow and change. It ups the emotional stakes, the conflict, the tension, and it can also offer a little bit of breathing space in your novel. All right, things to consider. Has to be a good reason for the couple to share time and space in your story. It's not necessary to have a happily ever after or happily for now. And you have often this very slow burn, of romance that builds up over several books. Okay, and just as your mystery involves lots of obstacles in solving the case, the romantic subplot often has lots of ups and downs, so it can be useful to analyze your goal, your motivation, your conflict for your romance as well as your mystery. So I want to know if you have any questions or comments or things that you've been thinking about romantic mysteries or wondering about. Anybody have anything they'd like to ask about, or have I put you to sleep?
I have a question, Lynn.
Yes, Sheila.
Well, you have a mystery and a romance happens in it, but it's a subplot. It is not the main force of that mystery or suspense.
Right.
That is not romantic mystery or romantic suspense. It's still just a mystery or suspense. Is that possible, or all of them that have romance in them, regardless of mystery and suspense, makes them romantic mysteries and suspense? I'm trying to figure out if you have a thriller and there's a romantic subplot going underneath, but it's really not the main focus of the book. Right. Does that just make it a plain old thriller or suspense, or is it considered romantic because of having romance in it?
Right. I think you can even call it a romantic thriller, or a thriller with romantic elements or whatever. But often in a thriller, there is some romance, right?
Right. That's the reason I was curious.
Yeah. But, primarily people who read thrillers, they may love the romantic subplot, but they're reading it because they like thrillers.
Exactly. That's me. I'm like, it's just romance is part of a subplot to develop the characters, but it's not really like a romantic thriller per se. So it's like, how would you classify that if you wrote something like that? Would it be just a thriller then, rather than a romantic thriller?
I think you could call it a romantic thriller, because romantic, that's the adjective describing it, but the thriller is what it is.
Right.
Makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, it does.
But and in the romance field, of course, there are all these subgenres of romances. You have paranormal romances, you have romantic suspense, with historical romance. They have a ton of different subgenres. But I had actually an interesting thing, because I've always thought of Leisha's song as a romantic mystery, and I think I was trying to join the Romance Writers of America or something like that. And, but it wasn't clear whether I was going to be considered a professional member or a whatever, and an associate member. And then the woman who was reviewing it said, well, I think Leisha's song is really a romance, and so I said, oh, yes, it is, so yeah, I think there's an awful lot of crossover and stuff like that.
I was just like, if you'd written a thriller and it happened to have a romance in it, would they try to put it as a thriller, or would they put it as a romantic thriller, or would they put it in both?
Maybe both. I don't know. It's too bad we don't have Elaine here, because she has a lot.
She would tell us how they were classified.
A lot of experience in figuring out where to place things in the bookstore. And that's a big question. And I know there's a lot of. I know quite a few writers of color who become very incensed that their books are automatically put in the African American section, even though they may have written a steamy romance or whatever. So I don't know. A lot of this stuff has to do with, it's a business, how they think they can sell it,
Mhm.
where they're going to try to market it, or how they're going to try to market it. So
On that note, Lynn, I was going to mention, and I think I sent this out to folks a few months ago, but every now and then I get data that comes across, and they said that unit sales were up 41% in 2021 for romance novels,
yeah,
higher in 2022, and they expect that trend to continue. So even though overall book sales are declining, the growth market seems to be romance. I'm not a romance reader or writer, but for those of you that are interested, I think that can be a selling point.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There are a lot of hopeless romantics like me in the world. So,
Lynn, do you
Lot
want to
who
stop?
like hot guys.
yeah, yes,
Lynn.
you noticed that I had to put the hot guys in there,
Of
the hot
course.
couple in there. Yeah. So,
Lynn,
yes,
do you want to stop sharing your screen so we see?
I wanted to show you one more thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay, but then we'll stop sharing. I thought it might be fun. It's always terrible when people say something might be fun, then you know it's not going to be. But I thought maybe we could try our hand in just maybe like 5 minutes or so, brainstorming for a romantic mystery. And I thought of these 3 questions. One, what's the crime or inciting incident that you think is going to kick your story off? This is just making something up that you might sometime want to work on. And the second question is, who is your protagonist and why are they driven to investigate? So that's kind of like the so what factor. And then the third thing is, who is the protagonist's romantic interest and how did they get into your story and what does their presence add? So would you like to try your hand at doing this? Maybe each of us just taking about 5 minutes? Or would you prefer all doing this together? Any thoughts on this? Radio silence, Mickey. Okay.
Now I'm hearing that. Does anybody want to, let's do it. Let's do a little brainstorm. The first thing that came to mind for me when you said, what's the crime or inciting incident? I pictured 2 people, maybe they've gone on a really intense first date. They end up in bed together, surprising both of them. And then there's a murder in the building. That was one of the things I thought of.
All right, well, that's very cool. And of course, what would be very interesting is if they wake up and one of them is dead.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
That might be a possibility. I don't know. Anyway,
That's
So-
good.
okay. All right. So we got a murder in the building, possibly in the bed. So who is our protagonist going to be, and why do they want to investigate? What do you think, guys? Who's going to be the protagonist?
Protagonist is the surviving
Survivor.
person.
Right.
So
Okay,
let's
we got them
say
in bed together. That's good because that's really good because then they're probably thinking, oh my gosh, people are going to think I did this, and I better figure out who did it. They're about to slap the cuffs on me and carry me off or something. So
Not to mention that if they just went on a romantic date and ended up in bed together, they don't know. He doesn't, or whoever survived, doesn't know that much about the dead person.
right,
Which is going to make them be more of a suspect. And
right.
their motivations to try to solve this.
Yes, that's excellent, Jeanette. That's so true. And, since you don't really know this person, you have no idea who his cronies are, or whether he was in trouble, or there are people out to get maybe her as someone close to him, or she's a hot mess. Okay, so she's in trouble. And there's a very good reason why she wants to investigate. So who would be her romantic interest? I just thought of something. what if, what if she has a boyfriend and she has been having a little side action,
Oh, side hustle.
a little side hustle there with this guy, and then it blows up in her face. And maybe her boyfriend, her romantic interest, is pretty upset with her.
Maybe he's actually the detective that gets assigned to this case.
Oh,
I
good.
think so too, but
That's
that would
really
be
good.
worse.
That's really good. Yeah. So he's the detective. He's getting assigned to this case.
I think it should be the guy who lives across the hallway, because she goes over there and she's asked him for help before. So she goes over and it's like, there's a dead guy in my bed, and I can't tell you everything about how he got there, but
He's there,
I need
dead.
your help.
Right.
And he turns out to be the killer.
Oh,
Oh,
That's-
yes,
wow.
yes.
That
And-
would be really something. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's good, Susan. That's
But
really
back to the boyfriend, are we saying that the boyfriend, the love interest of the poor lady who survived the dead attack on this lover here, he's going to be the investigating officer, the boyfriend?
well. We have two ideas here. I think
Okay.
one idea would be that her boyfriend is the person assigned to the case.
Okay.
But
Cool.
Susan was suggesting, I think, what if he's just a guy she knows who lives across the hall? She runs over because she's panic stricken. And what if he turns out to be the murderer? Did I say that right?
Yeah.
So either one of those, you could go with either one of those. And that would be great. I mean, that definitely being in hot water with your boyfriend because you were cheating, and having him be the detective and wondering now if he was not only romancing a cheating girlfriend but a murderer. And that is a really cool idea. And then I love Susan's idea of what if she thinks, oh, he's such a sweet boy, such a sweet guy across the hall, he's helped me, open the jars I can't get open, or fix a light. Such a nice guy. I don't really know him very well. And then what if he turns out to be the murderer?
Sounds like that series called You.
Really? I haven't
Yes.
seen that one.
It's
seen it.
pretty intense. It's
Okay.
not for the faint of heart at all.
Okay. Very cool. Well, we can close my screen up now, I guess. Let's see how I do that.
I think it would be fun too to have her work be something that would disapprove of that. Like maybe she worked for a church or childcare or somewhere that this getting out would be just horrible. That's why she goes to the neighbor to hope to clear this up real quick so it doesn't get out.
I'm thinking too that the poor neighbor murderer guy, he killed her lover of the night because he was trying to save her for him. Like I'm the one that opened the jars, and then here you are and him with him, so he got to go.
Right.
Oops.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that would be a good motivation for the guy across the
Yeah.
hall.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
That's sort of like a stalker too. It's like, I did all this for you,
Or
and you go off.
open jars and unjam doors, and what do you get? What I get?
Hurry my
Yeah,
groceries
really.
in.
Help you
Right?
hang the drapes, for God's sakes.
Maybe our protagonist is a little promiscuous, and that's
I
how she
would
ended up
say.
in bed with this person. And this, her change, her growth is that she stops doing that.
It's in her best interest.
Yes.
Her lovers keep getting murdered, so hey,
Yeah, right.
What happens? What suppose
Hearing lesson.
Now that would be funny. That becomes almost satirical. Like every time I bring a guy home, he he's dead.
suppose
doing
it's
it?
a little, suppose it's a bit more nefarious. Suppose her across the hall neighbor is using her as bait to bring more victims into his realm.
Could be. That That's evil, Lorena.
Yeah,
It is.
well,
Go out and get more men for me.
that's right.
Jeffrey,
Exactly.
Jeffrey Dahmer, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, okay.
Well, I think we've got some very good ideas here. Yeah.
But the one thing I find a little bit confusing or daunting or whatever is all these, because you talked about, well, decide whether it's this or that. So you know
Right.
sort of what publisher to go after.
Right.
Going, all these subcategories are like way too confusing. And I'm thinking if you're a publisher who does romantic mystery, you're probably the same publisher who's doing romantic suspense, aren't you, or not?
I don't know. I actually don't know.
It would be
That was my conundrum. Is like, okay, what if
Yeah.
I'm writing what I consider a thriller, and it has some romance in it? Should I look for a publisher that just does thrillers, or just because it's got romance in it, am I pigeonholed into going into like romantic suspense or thriller publisher?
I think a lot of times what helps is to look at what they've published,
Mhm.
see what they've published,
Mhm.
how they describe their books, also their wish list, what are they looking for,
Mhm.
kind of thing. I mean, because I do think romantic suspense, there's a lot of crossover between romantic mystery and romantic suspense. But my guess is there are some publishers who lean more closely to one or the other.
Mhm.
And it was kind of interesting when I was talking with Beth Henderson, who many of you know, and she has written a lot of romantic suspense and a lot of romantic mystery. She told me that she thinks it's a matter of percentages, that like you usually have a 60-40 split, and she says if 60% of your book is about the mystery and 40% is about the romance, you probably have a romantic mystery. For romantic suspense, it'd be the opposite. 60% would be the romance and the suspense. I thought that was very interesting. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
But I don't know. As readers, I just don't know that we care that much. But as once we're marketing our work, we have to know what we're shooting for, and they're going to want to know. And if you say, "Oh, well, my story is applicable to all genres, and my target audience is everyone," they won't believe you, and they won't be interested. So you do have to. Part of it is you have to decide how you're going to market yourself, because that's right up there in the first sentence of the query letter. I mean, they want to know how long, word count, and what's your genre.
Mhm.
How are you going to describe what you're doing? So I don't know, but anyway, anybody else have any questions or thoughts or anything? Did I do too much talking? I'm sorry if I talked too much.
Very
No?
good.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Lynn.
You're always so informative and educational. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Lynn. Thanks. Yeah. So are we about done, Susan? Do you have anything else to talk about?
It's up to you. If I don't know if we've got any more business to conduct, but if there are no more questions, then I'll stop the recording just so we have a clean into the recording. So are we all good with that? I'll just
Thank you so much, Lynn.
Oh,
Really.
Thank you
Very
It was
much.
great.
Thanks.
Yes.
You're so welcome.
Yes, thank you.
It's fun